Unless you've played a ton of Total War Rome, chances are you'll think of this when someone says Lusitania. But what you might not know is that Lusitania was indeed a real place, a country located in what we now call the Iberian Peninsula. The Lusitanians existed at the time of the Roman Empire, and although heavily debated, it is generally accepted that they were a Celtic warrior people, formed of various tribes. In history, it seems that the Lusitanians have been forgotten, or at least overlooked, compared to Britannia or the Gauls. But this little nation, this gorgeous group of people, were a constant pain to the Roman Empire, a people deemed to be inferior and backwards by the Romans themselves. The Lusitanian War lasted between 155 and 139 BC, and in this period one single warrior stands out. A hero revered by scholars of the time, a man so glorious that his name still echoes 2,000 years later. No one knows for certain where Viriatus was born in Iberia, or as the Romans called it, Hispania. We know from scholars of the time that he was a man of humble origins, a shepherd, a thief, a farmer. And this is a crucial point in the story, because although Viriatus is not of noble birth, he is clearly a man of the people, and this will come to be one of his strongest assets. We know that Viriatus was an amazing warrior, a natural-born leader. The harsh environment in which he was born molded him into a tough and quick-thinking man. He was also humble, and he never lost touch of his upbringing. He lived a frugal life until the end. He could not be bought. He was unfazed by riches, and most of all believed in freedom and equality for the Lusitanian people. He despised Roman wealth and was above all proud of his nomadic life and his country. Scholars of the time highlight that Viriatus was of peak physical condition. He was not fazed over the cold or hunger, but of all his qualities, perhaps his intelligence is most important. Viriatus was a quick thinker, a natural-born leader that understood the arts of war and diplomacy. But to understand how Viriatus the shepherd came to be called the king, chief, general of all Lusitanians, we must first go back to 150 BC, a time before Viriatus was even known, to an event we will call the Galba Betrayal. This is an event named after its wonderful creator, Roman praetor Servius Sulpicius Galba. Mr. Galba was a naughty man who at the time was the praetor of Hispania. Sick of war against the local natives, and after losing 7,000 men, to his surprise, Mr. Galba receives a peace offering from the Lusitanians, who basically say, "Look pal, we made a mistake. We don't want to fight Rome." Mr. Galba's eyes glistened. He accepts the peace offering and he tells the Lusitanians, "You should be allied to Rome, and in return you will receive rich farmland." The Lusitanians of course accept this offer. I mean, from killing 7,000 of his men to receiving rich farmland, that is a big leap. Upon accepting the offer, the Lusitanians are split into 3 factions by Mr. Galba. They are then sent to their new farmlands to start their new life. They also, and this is important, they hand in their weapons, because according to Mr. Galba, they wouldn't need them. A life of warfare was behind them, and this was a new beginning. When the Lusitanians arrive at their new land, they are met by an ambush. Mr. Galba had planned it all along, and in that one single day, 9,000 Lusitanians are massacred and 20,000 enslaved. Around 1,000 people managed to escape, and among these people is our boy Viriatus. Well, if Game of Thrones taught me anything, it's that you best kill them all. Otherwise, you are in for some disgusting revenge. After the Galba betrayal, 3 years of peace follow, or so the Romans thought. It's in this period that Viriatus is made leader of his little clan, and he starts making some moves. He starts going and collecting men and putting an army together for war. He wants to avenge his mates, and he hates the Romans. Viriatus's leadership skills first come to light during an attack in the Beaturia region of Spain. Here, a force of 10,000 Lusitanians is met by a marching force of 10,000 Romans that defeat and corner the Lusitanians with ease. The Romans call for a surrender, and the Lusitanian leaders think to accept, but Viriatus, a junior officer in the army, reminds the men of the transgressions of Rome. He reminds them of the Galba betrayal and presents an offer. In return for being made leader of the army, Viriatus develops a brilliant and cunning plan. He tells 9,000 of the men to scatter in every direction. This, of course, to confuse the Romans. Whilst these men scatter, Viriatus asks the remaining 1,000 best men to stay put with him. At the signal, the men scatter and the Romans don't know what to do. They can't surely chase so many fleeing enemies, so they decide to charge Viriatus and his 1,000 men. Viriatus occupies the Romans long enough for the army to flee, after which he himself and the remaining soldiers run away. It's here that Viriatus goes on to use a technique that he would go on to be remembered for: guerrilla warfare. Viriatus and his men reassemble not too far from the battlefield. After discovering that the much slower and sluggish Roman army was on course to find him, Viriatus decides to employ another cunning plan. Viriatus moves his army into the city of Trebola, hoping that the Romans would be stupid enough to follow. The Romans just thought, we've got this. Numerical superiority, right? Well, they were no match for the genius of Viriatus, because when the Romans reached Trebola, Viriatus lures them into a passage. Once in this confined space, the Lusitanians jump out of everywhere and massacre the Romans and everyone they can see in sight. Some Romans do flee, but this is Viriatus's first victory. The birth of the leader, the birth of the legend, is complete. The Romans try to use local tribes to defeat Viriatus, but it's to no avail. Busy with other wars, Rome simply does not have enough resources to deal with the barbarian. As a result, Viriatus starts making his way through Iberia unchecked, conquering and winning major battles. Rome does send more men, and every now and then they send new leaders, but it seems like Rome cannot beat Viriatus. For every skirmish, for every battle won, he always has a backup plan. After years of fighting and foiling Roman plans, in 140 BC, Viriatus presents a peace treaty. The Roman Senate begrudgingly accepts his treaty and recognizes Viriatus as king of the Lusitanians. But this was temporary. The mighty Roman Empire could not accept that this barbarian, these uncivilized people, bested legion after legion, outwitted the smartest Roman generals. After all, what message would this send to the rest of the empire? The treaty was eventually broken a year later in 139 BC, with the arrival of a new Roman leader, Quintus Servilius Caepio. This man really hated the Lusitanians. He, of course, was supported by the Roman Senate, who quietly encouraged him to provoke the Lusitanians so they would have a legitimate reason to go to war. After enough prodding, Viriatus has no choice but to pick up arms and resume war against Rome. He employs his guerrilla warfare and starts to terrorize Romans. However, Caepio establishes a stronghold deep into Lusitanian land. From here, he starts laying waste to tribes in the north, tribes that had been allied to Viriatus and the Lusitanians. Another tragedy hits when Popilius Laenius, a Roman leader that had been fighting the Celtiberian tribes from the center-east regions of Iberia, decides to join Caio in fighting Viriatus and the Lusitanians. Viriatus was now fighting on two war fronts against two very powerful enemies. As a man that cared deeply for his people, he couldn't bring himself to put them through war again. So he decides the best course of action is to sue for peace once more. To negotiate a new treaty, Viriatus sends his three most trusted men, Lieutenants Audax, Ditalco, and Menurus, or as I like to call them, the Simps. Why? Because these trusted men that had fought with Viriatus since the beginning of the rebellion, reach Caio, and after a couple of hours of negotiations, agree to betray Viriatus and stab him in the back. Disgusting. After a couple of days of enjoying the Roman bribes, the three simps make their way back to the Lusitanian camp. At this point, Viriatus slept in full armor, because he wanted to be ready for battle should it even come when he slept. The three simps make their way into the tent, and a sleepy Viriatus is caught off guard. They stab him in his throat and escape into the night. What's so incredible and fascinating about this story is that, according to legend, when the three simps got back to Caio to claim their reward, they were told Rome does not pay traitors, and were sent away with nothing. The discovery of Viriatus's body brought great sadness to the Lusitanian people, who I think must have thought their god had died. Defeating the Romans was now surely out of reach. Viriatus's funeral was held with all the pomp and circumstance that the Lusitanians could afford. His entire army was present. There were gladiator battles over his grave, all in remembrance of the man that defied the Roman Empire. The location of Viriatus's grave has been lost with time, but I get a sort of comfort knowing that his body returned to the earth that he fought so hard to protect. After this, the war against Rome was over, and the Romanization of Iberia spread like wildfire. Roman customs took over, Latin became lingua franca, and Lusitania fell into memory. Thank you so much for watching. This was really fun to make. If you have any stories or anything that you feel like you want to share, please let me know in the comments. I think it's really important to remember history that's not in the mainstream to ensure the survival of as many stories as possible. So stay tuned, subscribe, and have a good one. Peace.